fact of the matter is people just do not grow up. I mean, they just don't. So it doesn't matter how old somebody is. They could be as old as me. I'm almost 70 years old, and still we have emotional immaturity. That to me is so disappointing, and it blows me offline every time because I expect people to act like adults because they look like adults. And when I was a kid, kids acted like kids, and adults were expected to behave like adults. But when you become an adult, are you following me on this? When you become an adult, suddenly you realize these people are as immature as they were in third grade or even before that. Well, what about people with Asperger syndrome? There are some people who actually do try to behave like adults, including people with autism. So I cobbled together a list of things that I've noticed that are signs or traits, rather, of emotionally mature Aspies. And let me share with you these things. Number one is an emotionally mature Aspie tends to be what I would call centered or level-headed. By that I mean he or she has realistic expectations. I still do, but I've had trouble with this basically all my life. I'm nearly 70 years old. Over the decades, I've learned a thing or two. And the reason I make these videos is to share with you what I learned when I was your age, child, teenager, young adult, middle-aged, now maybe older, whatever. I just want to share with you what I've experienced. And what I've experienced is that people are not as mature as you would expect. I was going to say as they should be. I don't know what they should be, but I know this, they're not. So number one is a mature Aspie is somebody who is centered, level-headed, and understands that realistically people are just what they are. I mean, they're just like they were in third grade. So you got this guy maybe 50, 60, 70 years old. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a relative, a neighbor, maybe it's somebody you work with, maybe it's somebody at church or at the lodge, whatever, and you're wondering, why does this person act like an 11-year-old? Because people don't grow up. But a mature person with Asperger syndrome gets it. He realizes that I live in a world of 11-year-olds. I live in a world of emotional children. And once you grasp that, then those expectations disappear, and suddenly it becomes easier for you to deal with it. Now, the thing that I like to point out to people with Asperger's is, at least this is my opinion, it really doesn't get better. I mean, people don't change. I will now and forever have autism. It's not going to get better. But what I can do is I can learn to manage what doesn't change. I can manage it better. So that's where I'm hoping to go with you. Number two is a mature Aspie is one that is learning confidence, self-confidence, or self-empowerment. That is, we don't let the whims and the winds and the storms of life blow us over every time. There are difficulties, and we say, these are difficult times. We don't pretend they're not there, but what we do is we understand that we need to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and with confidence, with self-empowerment, we're going to manage to get through this. Okay, that's really easy to say. Now do it. Okay, that's not so easy, right? So let's say you're having a financial crisis. How do you smoothly go through that? I mean, it's not easy when you got bill collectors calling you, right? Let's say that you got a job and you're being basically tormented by your coworkers. It's easy to say just be self-empowered and confident. It's not that easy to actually do it. And you probably know that as well as I do. But still, we recognize that is a part of life and it's got to be dealt with, and so we deal with it. But I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's a piece of cake. I'm saying sometimes it's difficult. It's very difficult, usually. But still, we can handle it and, just take it and deal with it. Number three is a sign of a trait of a mature Aspie is they are self-aware. By that I mean, again, we don't change. We are who we are, but we become aware of our strengths and our weaknesses. Throughout all of our videos, we usually touch on some of these. And, for example, we all know that we don't have strong social skills. Well, a centered Aspie, an Aspie who is mature, doesn't pretend otherwise. He or she knows and admits, I have poor social skills, and I'm not as competent as neurotypical people. I accept it. And now, when I face others, when I'm out in a social environment or whatever it is, at least I'm aware of what I'm up against. And that, in my mind, is a sign of a mature Aspie. Number 4 is we have a sense of self-respect. This may be one of the most difficult things for a person with Asperger syndrome, is to look yourself in a mirror and respect yourself because, hey, when you were growing up, right, in school, whatever, you may have been bullied, you may have been picked on. I didn't have a lot of that, but I certainly was ignored by and large. And so, I have these feelings of inferiority. And we have these feelings that we don't necessarily respect ourselves. But when you become mature, you understand, okay, I am who I am. I am what I am, and I deserve to be respected because everybody does, and I'm a body, right? So everyone is entitled to a level of respect as a human being. And because you're a body and everybody is entitled, look yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, I may not be the greatest person on the planet. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm not, but at least I'm entitled to respect. And if no one else in the world respects me, I can respect myself. And no, that's not arrogance. No, that's not narcissism. That's just common sense. Because, how do you expect other people to respect you if you don't respect yourself? So number 1 is we're centered. Number 2, confident. Number 3, self-aware. Number 4, self-respectable or self-respect. And number 5, one of the signs of a mature Aspie is we have learned to be courteous. Why is this even on the list? Well, because to neurotypical people, this is not as difficult. Well, it's not difficult at all because it's just part of who you are. But when you have Asperger syndrome, you're very self-conscious around other people. You have this sense of, as we mentioned earlier, this deep sense of inferiority. You can't look people in the eye. It's hard to be courteous to people when you can't even talk to them. But as we become mature, centered people with Asperger syndrome, we learn to, and sometimes it's difficult to do, but we learn to just be at least courteous, at least to say hello to people, to be kind to them, wave to them somehow, some way. Number 6 is we are empathetic. Now, one of the check marks of an Aspie person with autism is they lack empathy. Well, keep in mind there are 2 different kinds of empathy. There is affectionate empathy or affective empathy, where we care about other people. And then there is cognitive empathy, and that is where we are lacking, and that is we're not aware of body language, facial expressions, voice inflections, those things we don't pick up on. I mean, we may hear them and see them, but it's like listening to a foreign language. We hear it, got no idea what it says, or maybe like a dog whistle where they're making noise, but we can't even hear the noise. So what happens is we just don't have that cognitive empathy. But don't confuse that with affectionate empathy, affective empathy, because people with Asperger syndrome who are mature, they are or can be very, very empathetic. We may not show it, but we actually care about others, particularly family members. Number 7 is we tend to develop healthy boundaries. Now, I don't know about you, but in my natural state, I just don't have any boundaries. I'm approachable by anybody because I think everybody's a good guy because it just makes sense. Why would anybody be a bad guy? Why would anybody want to hurt anyone, right? That just doesn't make sense. I mean, that's just not reality. As we said earlier, one of the signs of a mature Aspie is we face reality, but, particularly as a kid and even it was obvious. There are bad people all around me, but still, I had this the psychologically the psychological foundation of my thinking that people were inherently good, all of them, all the time, and I was shocked every time I discovered, which was usually several times a day, the people were less than perfect. Sometimes they were just flat out jerks, dishonest, mean, hateful. But until you come to terms with that reality, you can't set up boundaries because you're not expecting to be attacked, right? So you don't have walls of protection around you because, who's going to attack me? Everybody's basically good, even though they're attacking me all the time. Now that seems so very strange, particularly to Aspies who go through that bullying stage, as kids. They don't set up, a lot of times people with Asperger syndrome don't build boundaries. We just get away. We get away from the problem. We're not there any longer. But as we mature, as we become adults, as we have centered thinking, we realize, I'm going to put up these boundaries. They're going to be tall. They're going to be wide. I'm not going to do whatever you want me to do every time you want me to do it. If you harass me, you may wish you hadn't. So we build these boundaries. Not easy thing to do. And I got to reiterate what I said at the very beginning. People don't change. It does not get better. What happens is we learn to adapt. We learn strategies for dealing with the real world as it actually is. Then number 8 is we tend to be independent. As we mature, as we become, adults, emotionally mature, we become independent. Well, I thought I was independent already, right? I'm kind of a loner. I'm avoidant. I stay away from people. Is that not independence? Well, sometimes it is, physically because you're away from people. But what we're talking about is we get to that place where now listen, because this is important. As mature Aspies, we get to the point where we no longer need approval from others. If they don't like me, they got a problem. It's not my problem. And when we understand that the rejection of others may be problematic, but it's not our problem, it's their problem. That doesn't mean it's not a problem, it's just not our problem. Does that make sense? You see those 2 rectangles on the screen? If you like what you heard and you want to hear some more, let's keep on talking. Just click one of those 2 rectangles and the conversation continues. If not, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all next time.